She stood barefoot in the cold, blood drying on her lip, eyes locked on something only she could see. Wind pulled at her dress, her coat long gone, her feet blew against the frost-bitten gravel. Around her, boys laughed, not boys, not really the kind that wore cruelty like a badge and drank daring like whiskey. One of them tossed a coin. It bounced off her collarbone. She didn't flinch. Samuel Hartwell watched from the hardware store window, a coffee cooling in his hand, his limp aching like a warning. She didn't scream, didn't beg, just stood there, still as winter, like she'd forgotten how to run. A girl like that wasn't lost. She'd already been taken. And something in Samuel, something old and cracked and stitched together wrong, moved before his mind did. The workshop smelled of rust, scorched pine, and oil that never washed from skin. Morning light filtered through warped glass, broken into prisms by dust motes and cobwebs. Samuel moved slow, methodical, like each step cost something. The old leg dragged behind him in half-time rhythm, boot sole worn thin on one side. The wood stove groaned low with heat. The tools on the wall hung in a language of quiet function, bent, reworked, held together by wire and will. He picked up a kettle with a hole punched through its belly. His thumb traced the dent like a memory. No one waited on this kettle. No one needed it. But still, he set it on the bench like it mattered. Outside, the town bustled in a way that always felt too loud. He heard children call each other names in jest, heard church bells that no longer meant much. He hadn't stepped inside a sanctuary since the war, not for God, not for forgiveness. He doubted either kept books on men like him. A shelf in the corner held a music box that wouldn't sing in a photograph, corners curled. A woman in the frame wore a shawl the color of river clay. Her face soft, but eyes alert. Next to her, a man whose youth clung awkward to stiff shoulders, barely Samuel, before the uniform, before the cane, before the blood that wouldn't scrub clean. He lived above Morrison's, ate alone, spoke in short nods, fixed what others broke, but never touched his own ruins. Sometimes, on colder nights, he'd wake to phantom gunshots, sweat pooling beneath his back like a second skin. On those nights, he lit the lamp low, drank stale coffee, and talked to things that couldn't talk back: the music box, the cracked clock, a spoon too twisted to use. He didn't expect anything new, didn't want it. But the silence he had built like armor had begun to hum lately, like something was moving inside the walls. Like something was coming. The door to the workshop banged open before noon, too early for drop-offs, too late for morning greetings. Samuel turned, rag still in hand, to find Billy Morrison shoving someone through. "She's all yours, Hartwell," Billy smirked, breath reeking of cheap tobacco. "You like broken things, don't you?" Clara stumbled forward, her face pale beneath dirt and dried tears. Her coat was back now. Someone had thrown it at her like a shroud. She didn't meet Samuel's eyes. Just stood there, arms at her sides, shoulders drawn up like she expected another blow. Billy leaned in the doorway, watching. She's gone soft in the head. Walks the streets like a ghost. Thought you could fix her up, maybe teach her how to hammer nails or talk to spoons. Laughter bubbled up from his throat, hollow as a rusted bell. Samuel said nothing, just stared at the girl. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't move. But there was a flicker, barely a tightening of her jaw, a defiance curled beneath all that silence. Billy waited for a reaction. When none came, he scoffed and spat on the floor. "Suit yourself, freaks," he muttered, and left with the door wide open, letting in the cold. For a long while, Samuel didn't speak. Just stood there, her breathing and his clock ticking out of sync. Then he walked to the door, closed it softly, and turned back to her. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded, once, almost ashamed of it. And that was the moment so small, it barely registered that cracked something deep inside him. Not pity, not charity, recognition, like hearing your own name whispered from someone else's mouth. She ate slow, fingers trembling around the tin cup as if the warmth inside might vanish if she drank too fast. Samuel watched from across the room, pretending to tinker with a rusted hinge, but his hands never moved. Clara's eyes weren't wild, not like the townspeople whispered. They were heavy, tired, like she'd been staring at something no one else could see for too long and had forgotten how to look away. That afternoon, he gave her a stool near the fire and a handful of screws to sort. Nothing hard, just enough to keep her hands busy. She didn't speak. Not with words. But when she held up 2 bolts that didn't match, waiting for his nod, something passed between them, a quiet agreement to stay in the same room and not ask too much. By evening, word had spread. Old Mrs. Leland passed by the window, her gaze sticking like pitch. Her cane tapped the wood in sharp judgment. The pastor's wife lingered outside the bakery just long enough for Samuel to notice. Even little Anna Carter, who used to bring him her broken music box every spring, walked by without waving. Later, when he made supper-thin stew and dry bread, he caught Clara staring at the cracked mirror above the workbench. Not at herself, at the photograph beside it. She touched the frame gently, then pulled her hand back like it burned. "That your wife?" she asked. "No," Samuel said. "My ma." Clara nodded, though the answer didn't seem to matter. She looked down at the bowl in her lap, the broth barely touched. "Why are you letting me stay?" The question hung there, thick and unsanded. He could have lied, said something about decency, said she reminded him of someone. But he didn't. "Because someone should," he said quietly. Back then, she didn't ask what he meant. Didn't need to. But that night, after she curled on the cot in the corner, he found himself sitting beside the music box again. Still broken. Still silent. He wound it anyway, just to hear the click. And listened to the nothing it gave back. Rain came slow the next morning, a steady whisper on the roof, like the sky was grieving something it didn't know how to name. Samuel stood at the window, watching the street blur in gray. Clara was still asleep, curled into herself like a letter never sent. On the bench, the broken music box lay open, same as ever. Dancer still missing her arm. Mechanism rusted. Useless, some would say. Just like the girl under his roof. Just like the man who kept fixing things no one cared about. He lit the lamp early. Pulled the tools he rarely used. The delicate ones, the ones meant for precision, not force. Piece by piece, he began taking the music box apart. It wasn't just about the box. It was what it meant to believe something broken could still sing. The rain didn't stop. The town outside kept its distance. But inside the workshop, Samuel's breath steadied. The pain in his leg dulled. The shame in his chest, the one that came from surviving what others hadn't, from watching a girl thrown at his feet like garbage, began to shift. He wasn't fixing her. He never could. But he could hold space for her to remember she wasn't something to be thrown away. That afternoon, when Clara woke and saw him bent over the music box, she said nothing. Just watched, quiet as the rain. He didn't look up. Didn't need to. But his voice, when it came, was softer than she'd ever heard. Thought I'd see if she could dance again. Clara didn't answer, but her eyes shimmered, and she didn't look away. They came back by week's end, 3 of them this time. Billy, older now in his swagger, flanked by Jacob Reed and that boy from the mill with the nervous jaw. Rain had dried. Dust blew. Laughter returned to their mouths like rot to a wound. "You still got her, Hartwell?" Billy called, stepping into the open doorway like it was his. "Town's worried you've gone soft for the mad girl. Might be time someone did something." Clara stood near the back wall, hands stained with polish, sorting bent nails. She didn't flinch. Didn't hide. Samuel didn't reach for the hammer. Just straightened slow, his bad leg groaning as he put his weight on it. His voice, when it came, didn't rise. "You done laughing at things you're too small to understand?" Billy blinked. "What you say?" "I said," Samuel repeated, stepping forward. "You come in here like you built something worth protecting. But you've only ever known how to break." Billy's jaw twitched. "She's a ruin. Everyone knows. She's still here." Samuel's hand trembled, but he kept it at his side. "And so am I. You think that means nothing?" Jacob shifted uncomfortably. The mill boy looked down. Billy scoffed, but the laughter was thinner now. "You think you're better than us?" "No," Samuel said. "But I'm not afraid of what I see when I look at her." Silence bloomed. The words cost him. Brought the war back in jagged flashes trenches, screaming, "Friends who didn't crawl out." It opened him to the eyes around him, to judgment and ridicule, to the risk of being seen, not as a craftsman, but as a man broken in ways they couldn't name. But it was truth. And in Clara's gaze, steady and unmoved, he saw it land. Not as defense, as dignity. The boys left. Not with a fight. Just the uneasy shuffle of those who'd glimpsed something they couldn't undo. That night, Samuel placed the fixed music box on the table. He opened the lid. The dancer turned, slowly, to a tune soft as breath. Clara watched her move. Then whispered, "She remembers." Morning light spilled across the workshop floor like warm milk, quiet and gold. Dust floated in the stillness, dancing slow above Clara's head as she sat with her back to the sun, sewing the lining of a cracked leather satchel with steady hand. Samuel watched from his bench. No words. Just the hush between two people who had nothing to prove and everything to carry. He turned the key on the music box once more, not to fix, not to test, just to hear it live again. The melody spun out soft and crooked, like an old memory learning how to speak. Clara hummed with it this time. Not loud, just under her breath. A thread of sound stitched into silence. Outside, the town moved on, wagons creaked. Roosters called. Someone cursed about a loose wheel. No one looked up at the workshop window. But inside, something had shifted. Not healed. Not erased. Just held. Samuel reached over, picked up a dented tin cup, and poured the last of the coffee into 2 chipped mugs. He handed one to Clara without a word. She took it with both hands, and for the first time, she smiled small and crooked like the tune. It didn't change the world. But it was the kind of moment that stays, like a spark caught in the corner of a dark room, refusing to die.